In the summertime, the sun rises earlier and sets later. And about 100 years ago, people noticed, well, we're going to work at the same time in the summer, but the sun is up and we're sleeping through that. What if we could force people to wake up earlier? We'll turn the clock forward an hour, force people to work earlier in the summer, then they have more daylight exposure in the evening after work. There's a couple problems with that. We don't like changing the clocks. It's very uncomfortable, and it can be lethal in some cases. Also, it keeps us up later at night. Think especially if you have kids and you're going to the 4th of July fireworks. You're probably out until midnight, and then you have school or work in the morning. And then when we have daylight saving time in March, when we first spring forward, we're suddenly forcing ourselves to get up and go to school or work in the dark. And that's not very healthy or safe or enjoyable. And then right now, in October and early November, while we're waiting to fall clocks back from daylight time to standard time, we're again forcing people to start school or work in the dark. And again, that's not safe, healthy, enjoyable, good for education or the economy. Well, most legislators are not married to one clock or the other. Most want to end the clock change. Most citizens just want to end the clock change. And the legally, the easiest way is permanent standard time. Historically, it's the most sustainable way. And the safest way. When we've had permanent standard time, it has lasted for decades. And of course, prior to permanent standard time, we had solar time, which lasted for literally millennia. Permanent daylight time does not go well. We tried it in the US in the 1970s for the oil crisis. It was supposed to last for 2 years as an experiment. It only lasted about 6 months. I hope that daylight saving time ends permanently across the US and the world very soon. It will likely take at least a year, perhaps 2 or 3. It already ended in Arizona, where I live, about 50 years ago, and it's ended in Hawaii and the 5 US territories. But the other 48 states are still springing forward in March and falling back in November. And that's what we're working to end here at Safe Standard Time.
I wouldn't recommend doing any really stimulating activities, anything that involves bright light in an effort to keep them up later, because that could overstimulate them and then overshoot your goal, right? So we want the bedtime routine to be nice and calm and quiet and dim lights and no. We like electronics to be off at least an hour before bedtime. So I wouldn't recommend using bright lights or really stimulating activities or electronics in an effort to keep them up later. Ideally, we like to start transitioning sleep schedules at least a week ahead of time if we can. Now, of course, the time changes 2 days from now, so there's not very much time left, but it does take some time for kids to adjust their schedules. So we like to adjust gradually, meaning moving their bedtime by 15 to 30 minutes every couple of nights and let them adjust to that before we shift the schedule a little more. So for the fall time change, of course, we're falling back. So kids will be to adjust to the shift, we should be shifting the bedtime a little bit later and later and later. Certainly, if they're not getting adequate sleep, that's the biggest risk. Now, here with the fall time change, we get an extra hour in theory. So inadequate sleep shouldn't be as much of a problem as it is in the spring when we lose an hour. But they may be waking up earlier than they're used to after the time change. Maybe they typically wake up at 6:30 and all of a sudden come Sunday morning, that's now 5:30. So they are up much earlier than their body is used to. They may be more tired during the day. And when kids don't sleep enough or don't sleep well, we tend to see very different manifestations than we see in adults. When adults don't sleep well or don't sleep enough, we tend to just be tired. And often kids manifest with behavioral issues or irritability or trouble focusing in class. And it's less frequent that we see kids present with what seems like daytime sleepiness. They just show us their sleepiness differently.
Okay.